Hi guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the new COPPA guidelines as they apply to YouTubers, and more specifically, how this affects Booktube. If you're a content creator on YouTube, you know that there have been some big changes taking place in the last couple of weeks. And I wanted to sit down and talk with you guys about it because I've been seeing a lot of people, especially in the Booktube community, freaking out. There's been a lot of misunderstanding, I think, of what this means and how it affects our community. And so I thought it would be useful to sit down and kind of lay out what this is, how it does or doesn't affect us as a community, what you need to do about this if you're a content creator, etc. Let me say up front, I am not a legal professional. I am not a lawyer, so if you have bigger concerns, of course, feel free to go out and seek out professional counseling if you feel like you need it. I think part of the freak out is probably the fact that a lot of people didn't know that this was coming. I follow other channels that are specifically for content creators, and so I knew that some of these changes were coming a couple of months ago, where they've been talking about some of this stuff for a while, some of the changes coming in order to follow FTC guidelines and protect children's information. So, YouTube recently settled with the FTC and paid a very large fine and agreed to make some changes in the way that it handles child-directed content. And this is going to be leading to some big changes taking place in the new year. So let's talk about a couple of things here. The substance of this is that federal guidelines make it illegal for organizations to collect data on children, and one thing to be very clear on is that legally speaking in this context, a child is somebody under the age of 13. And I think some of the confusion, especially within the Booktube community, is thinking that this goes all the way up to 18. This does not apply to teenagers. This is children under the age of 13. It is illegal to collect data on them. This includes personal data, but it also extends to collecting data on their behavior online, which would then drive personalized ads. So for channels like mine that are monetized, where you have ads playing at the beginning of videos, most of those ads are personalized, targeted ads, which means that they use algorithms looking at the behavior of the person watching the video to target an ad specifically to them. If the person watching the video is under 13 years old, it's illegal to be doing that. So there are some changes that are taking place. If you're a content creator, you need to designate whether your channel is child-directed or not. Now, for a lot of channels, this is a really, really big deal, and it's complicated, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. There are plenty of people talking about that right now, but I really want to focus on the ways that this specifically is going to affect booktubers. In general, I would say it's actually not that big of a deal for Booktube. It's a huge deal for YouTube as a whole, but for most booktubers, this is not going to affect you that dramatically. Keep in mind, child-directed content is content directed at children under the age of 13. Practically speaking, as a content creator, you can designate your entire channel as not directed at kids, but if you have a few specific videos, and this is what I've done on my channel, which I'll talk more about, if you have a few specific videos that you feel like might fall into this child-directed content category, you can individually switch those videos over to saying that they are for children. There is a lot of concern about the possibility of fines because creators are going to be held responsible for abusing these guidelines, and the FTC does have the ability to fine you up to $42,000 per video for abusing this. However, number one, the FTC has said that they will determine the amount of the fine based on the size of the channel and based on whether or not it would put them out of business, so it's unlikely that small potatoes creators are ever going to get fines in that amount. Number two, they're not just going to fine everybody. This is specifically for people who are making content that they consider to be for children and not saying that it is for children. So in the context of Booktube, what does this mean? Most of the videos in our community are not videos that are targeted at children. They are general TBRs or reading wrap-ups or recommendation videos or vlogs. Now, if you are a booktuber who focuses on children's books, so we're talking picture books and maybe middle grade books, and you have videos that are specifically about those categories of books, then those videos you may want to label as child-directed content, because the books that are being discussed are books that are intended for children under the age of 13. However, if what you are primarily talking about are young adults and adult books, it's not going to be a problem. So since I've been making videos, there have been a few videos on my channel. Altogether, I would say maybe 20 or so of over 400 videos that I've made that I am being safe and marking as child-directed. Some of those are videos with middle grade book recommendations, books where I'm reading picture books with my kids. I would consider that child-directed. And also some of our family vlogs. My intent is not necessarily to be directed at children in those videos, but especially things like Halloween vlogs, where it's primarily featuring my kids in costumes and child-related activities. That could be construed as child-directed content, and so therefore I'm marking those videos as such. In general, though, my channel is not directed at children, and so the majority of my videos are staying as is, and I am not too concerned about it. I don't think most other booktubers need to be super concerned about it. I will reiterate again, this is not about teenagers, this is not about young adult books, this is about children under the age of 13, so we're talking about picture books, middle grade books, and maybe family vlogs that are really focused on child-related activities and things that kids might want to be watching. One other thing that I can think of where this would be applicable is things like children's book boxes. So like Owl Crate Jr. is targeted at children. So I know Books and Lala does unboxings with her son Liam sometimes of Owl Crate Jr. Those videos specifically, she probably would need to start marking as content made for children, because it's a book box targeted at children featuring her son primarily. That content, even if that may not be her primary audience, could theoretically be decided to be child-directed. But most of that content, that's just not the case. Okay, so with that out of the way, you might be asking, what exactly is going to happen to the videos that I do mark as made for kids? So a few things. Number one, the types of ads that will run on those videos, if your channel is monetized, will be different in that they will be general ads. They will not be targeted, personalized ads. So this doesn't mean that there won't be any advertising running on those videos, but what it does mean is that you will be making less money on the advertising from those videos than you would on personalized targeted advertising on your other videos. For most booktubers, the amount of money that we're making in ad revenue is not that significant anyway. This is probably not going to be a big deal. However, starting in the new year, other things that this means is that any video that you say is made for kids will not have comments enabled, so you won't be able to get that kind of interaction with your audience on those videos specifically. They're also probably not going to be searchable on a Google search, and they may not come up as often in recommended videos in the same ways, again, because of this weird FTC stuff. So in general, this is a big deal, and if you have thoughts and feelings on it, the FTC recently extended the deadline for giving comments on how they choose to enforce some of these laws until December 9th. So if you are interested in commenting on this, there is a petition that I'll link down below if you guys want to check it out. Also, if you want to give feedback to the FTC on the COPPA guidelines and the way that this impacts you or impacts YouTube, you have until December 9th to offer that feedback, which they'll take into consideration as they decide how exactly they want to enforce these guidelines. Another question you might have is, okay, but what if I'm an international YouTuber? Does this still affect me if this is American law? The answer is that yes, it does. Because YouTube is an American company, anybody creating content on YouTube is going to be held responsible for these same guidelines. So just because you don't live in the United States doesn't mean that you're not affected. So you still need to follow the same policies and procedures. Now, if you got fined, whether or not they would be able to effectively get that money from you is a whole other question. But in general, yes, you are still held responsible under the same guidelines. So another question people generally are having is, how do I decide if my content is child-directed? I will say the information that is given by the FTC is really vague, and I can see why this would be so frustrating and such a problem for a lot of YouTube creators with for example, gaming channels that kids like to watch, even though the content is not directed at kids. This is going to create a lot of problems for YouTube in general, and so I think speaking up about this is worth doing. I think in the case of Booktube, it's not going to have that much of an impact. But if you care about YouTube as a whole, I think it's still worth being aware of. So some of the things that they look at includes the use of animated characters or child-oriented activities and incentives, which of course is kind of vague. They do say that they understand that some animated content is for a general audience and not specifically for children. One thing that we're seeing some people start to do is including more swear words in their animated content to make it clear that it is for adults. Yeah, I mean, I actually think that there are some problems associated with this, even if Booktube isn't specifically going to be affected that much. One problem of this is that it decreases the democratization of educational content for kids because YouTube is free, and so there are kids whose parents can't necessarily afford to pay for Netflix or Amazon Prime who previously have had great access to educational videos and great kids content on YouTube, and because of these changes, some of that might end up going away. There are people who are creating kids shows on YouTube or wanting to do it where it's no longer going to be a viable business decision for them. And so, yeah, like this is something to definitely be concerned about for a lot of reasons, even if it doesn't directly affect Booktube at the moment. One other thing to look out for in the future, there's also probably going to be more things looking at brand deals and the way that that is discussed on channels, specifically targeting children, but in general as well. So I think there's more to come in terms of the government wanting to start legislate what's happening on YouTube. So I think making your voice heard is well worth doing, even if it's not directly going to affect Booktube that much at the moment. Other things that would make this child-directed are the kinds of music or other audio content, the age of the models, the presence of child celebrities or celebrities who appeal to children, the language or other characteristics of the site, and whether advertising that promotes or appears on the site is directed to children, and reliable empirical evidence about the age of the audience. So one last thing that I want to say before I hop off here is that this might be a good time if you are a creator to go take a look at your demographics in your analytics. I pay close attention to my analytics in YouTube Studio. I don't know if everybody else does. I do know some people who just never look at that. But if you're concerned about this, one thing that might be useful is to go and take a look at that and see what your audience actually is. Do you have a lot of young people watching your channel? And in a lot of cases, the answer is going to be no. If I look at the age demographics of my audience in the last year, I basically have 0% of people that they think are 13 to 17 years old watching my channel. The biggest chunk of my demographics are 25 to 34-year-olds. It's like 46% of the people that watch my channel are 25 to 34. So for me, the people that are generally watching the channel are not young children. This doesn't have a huge effect on me. Now, for some younger booktubers, this might be different. Your audience demographics might skew differently, and I know from talking to other creators that sometimes the more sort of bubbly, high energy creators can tend to have demographics that skew younger, so that might be worth looking at if that's a concern that you have. But like I said previously, a child is being defined as somebody under the age of 13, so in most cases this is just really not a thing that's going to apply to Booktube. Hopefully this was helpful and informative. I've had quite a few people messaging me on Instagram and Twitter and asking me if I'm worried about this or how I think it's going to affect Booktube. And because it's something that I have followed in other places and a lot of people seem to be kind of confused about what it is and what it means for our community, I thought it might be valuable to make a video about it. But in general, the answer to the question is no. I'm really not that worried, at least for my channel and for our Booktube community. However, I do think that this is a concerning trend and is one that we need to speak up about, because I think a lot of the people over at the FTC don't really understand what YouTube is and how it functions and what the audience demographics for different types of channels are, and why it's important to have some of these conversations and talk about, well, the way that the guidelines are being enforced, is that the way that they should be enforced? And I think that's an open conversation to have. So there you go. Talk to me in the comments down below. Let me know if you have any further questions about anything that I said, any comments or concerns. Leave any of that in the comments down below. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.